Hello, hello everyone. Welcome in to the live reading. I don't understand. Hold on, what? I see. Okay, they're scheduled. I ought to just leave them alone. All right, hopefully that'll work. I'm trying to schedule ads for my boss and they're being weird. So dumb. All right. Well, on that note, I have to wait an hour to do anything for that. Okay. I'm going to wait for other people to trickle in here for a second. I realize this is not my usual stream time, but I am ready. Hopefully we won't find any more weird typos, but knowing me, we sure as heck will. I already found a couple. That would have been embarrassing. I don't think my notification went off. I might even go try over on Facebook too. I don't know how fast that is actually. Let me post a TikTok story real quick. That could be it. That might be the thing I do as well. I don't know. I don't know how marketing works. I don't know what marketing is. Hold on, we're doing it. I'm taking a photo. I'm terrifying. I'm doing it. Am I a social media marketer? I don't know. I don't know if these things are like better to post to like stories or is this better for a post? I don't know. I don't know how to do these things. I don't know how marketing works. I don't know what's going on. Let me listen to this music. Hold on. Sure. I don't know. I'm okay. Everything is fine. Okay, we'll see if posting it to my main account actually works. We'll see what it does. We'll see what it does. Who knows? Maybe posting live announcements like that is actually for the best. We may not get anybody in here right away. So it's been 10 minutes, so I'm not going to delay the stream any longer. But before I get started again, for anybody viewing the VOD, hello. My name is Tycho. I'm an author, and I'm releasing a brand new book, or rather, it's the sequel to a book on May 28th, which means that day is coming very, very soon. My goal is to back the book before it launches. We are already like effectively 30% of the way there, and it's only been a couple of like a week-ish, give or take, that this thing has been live. So I'm going to be reading from Court of Snakes, Bitter Truth, Honey Justice, which is the sequel to Court of Snakes, This Desert Cage. It's the thing that I'm trying to kickstart is this super fancy special edition omnibus. It is very cool. It has full page illustrations in it, and this is the first time I've ever been able to have any of my digital artwork in my books. So I'm very stoked about it. It is super cool. It's got a fancy dust jacket. It's got gold foil on it. It's got a special case. It's got end papers. It's got a fancy little ribbon. So if you want one of these books, you have the opportunity to back it before anybody else can get a hold of a copy. So you can go ahead, head on over to this link. If you want it, let me know when I can post it into the chat. And you can click the back it button to back this bad boy. It probably will ship out by the end of July, right before I leave for Canada. So, or shortly after that, I'm going to be signing all the books and leaving them to my mama so that way she can ship them. So yeah, if you want it, I would be more than thrilled if you all backed the thing beforehand. But what we're going to be doing during stream today is just reading this book. For those of you who weren't here last time, we're about a fourth of the way through the book. Taryn is struggling with being a new leader and has effectively dissolved all of his autocratic power and has now tried to make the system more fair, but does not realize he has set himself up for failure. Parissa, the other main character, has discovered a bunch of secret, weird documents that indicate that the city that they live in is not at all what they thought it was. To make matters even more complicated, a stranger from supposedly outside the city has now entered the city and is making things very, very weird. So they thought they were isolated. They thought that they were alone in this city, that they were the last city on Earth. And long story short is, no, they were not. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this. 1 second. Let me try and get some people in here. Coolio. All right, well, without further ado, as always, you can watch the previous VOD to this to listen to the whole book if you'd like. It's over on my YouTube in the live section, and it's the same title as this particular live, which is YA, or live book reading, YA young adult dystopian fantasy. So you can check that out. If you're over on Twitch, it's also in my VODs as well. So here we go. Gone. Terran, Na'a, October of the first year. Damn it! Terran scrambled from his bedroom, throwing his boots on so fast to the point that he almost twisted his ankle. I don't know how it happened, Perseus stammered. I'm so sorry. My men should have been better trained for this. Don't talk! Just go! Terran ran after Perseus as the two of them dashed down the hallway together, bypassing the elevator and heading instead for the stairs. They leapt 2 or 3 stairs at a time and peeled around the corner when they reached the bottom of the embassy tower. It was only a quick run from there to get to the barracks where Perseus tore into the building that had held Ami that morning. 2 medics stood by the door tending to the wounds of the original men who had been standing guard in front of the room. The 2 of them very clearly had suffered from blunt force wounds with bruising on their faces, and it seemed that they had been attacked so fast that they had not even had time to draw their rifles. What happened? Terran asked, attempting to catch his breath as he looked down at the situation. They were ambushed, one of the medics explained. Sometime early this morning, someone or maybe a group attacked them. They both were unconscious when their shift replacements came to relieve them of duty. I can get rid of that. This is why we read this aloud. Okay. And Ami? Gone, Perseus explained. Whoever attacked my men made off with them. We have to get them back. We need them. Terran's heart pounded in his chest. They could not go missing, not when they were so close to knowing the truth. Terran's hand dove into his pocket, and from it he drew the judgment card. He heaved a sigh of relief and pressed the paper against the back of his hand. A wave of electricity shot through his body, and he shuddered with familiarity. In a way, the cards had become a sense of comfort. It reminded him of the connection he once had with Alexis, and every time he used them, it was a sign that the connection was still there. It could never be taken away. The gauntlet of metal from the back of his hand, or back of his card, wrapped its way around his hand as the paper disappeared, leaving behind nothing but the symbol of a pair of wings that draped their way around some kind of horn. Terran had seen nothing like it, but he trusted his intuition. The books that Lexus had given him had taught him that the judgment card would help punish those who had done wrong, so with any luck, the card would lead them straight to the perpetrators. What'd you pull? Perseus asked, looking over Terran's shoulder at his hand. Judgment. Let's go get our guide back. Terran rubbed his hands together and sparks began to form, shooting from his palms like his skin was a live wire, lightning arcing between his 2 hands. Once his hair stood up off his head, he pointed his hands forward and away from the building, and a bolt of electricity shot out toward the gates to the Na'a district. Hope you're ready to run, Terran called back as he took off, hoping that Perseus was right behind him. He chased the ball of lightning out of the barracks, away from the embassy, and through the streets of Na'a. The ball traced its way along the ground and then eventually down winding alleyways as Na'a turned to Atsa. Terran nearly tripped over uneven cobblestone as he leapt through the scaffolding of construction sites and over carts trying to keep up with the magic. For one brief moment he turned to look over his shoulder as he slid around a corner, thankful to see Perseus there as well. The 2 of them came to a grinding halt after finally reaching Zaya, peeling past the main well of the district into a shabby-looking building where the ball of lightning exploded into a shower of sparks and glitter as it hit the door. Perseus caught his breath and leaned against the post of the porch of the building, which creaked under his weight. The house looked to be 1,000,000 years old, and the old wood splintered and rotted at points of extreme wear. Terran held his hand up to signal Perseus to step back from the porch and then put a finger to his lips. Most likely, the abductors were still inside, and he and Perseus could not afford to make any extra noise. Terran crouched down near the door to find that the dirt outside of it had been disturbed recently, and he nodded to Perseus, who began to circle the building to find a better way in. After a moment of looking, he came back over and shook his head. All the windows are boarded up, he whispered. Okay, then we need to get the boards off. I don't trust going in through the front door. We should get Parissa. We don't have time, Terran insisted. I don't know what they'd want with Ami or how they even knew we had someone like that, but this can't be good. Perseus nodded toward the back of the house, and the two of them crept their way behind a few barrels in an alleyway next to the structure, out of sight. Once around the back, Perseus put his ear to the thin wall, hoping to determine whether anyone lurked inside. He quickly backed up from the window and shook his head, moving instead to a window at the front of the house. Terran held his breath. "I don't like this," he whispered. Perseus listened at the window again and nodded. "I think we're in the clear. Okay, be quiet." After planting his boot firmly on the house and ignoring the stares of passers-by, Perseus tugged as hard as he could on the boards over the window, but they did not budge an inch. He shook his head and huffed after the effort, his face flushed. Terran also tried his best, but could not get the board off. "Are you kidding me?" Terran pulled another card from his pocket, surprised to see the Wheel of Fortune, and he placed it onto his hand with resolution. As soon as the magic had taken hold, he looked around the front of the house. He approached the front door as silently as he could, and with his left hand touched the doorknob. With a click and a shower of magic off the back of his hand, the door popped open and unlocked itself. Terran nodded, and the two of them entered the home, ready to do what they needed to do. Perseus slowly drew his rifle, following Terran's lead. In the entryway, Terran pointed to his left, and Perseus followed the command, shuffling his way to check a door. Once there, he seemed to hear nothing and opened it. In only a moment, he closed it again and returned to Terran's side. Terran moved instead to his right and did the same with the opposite door. He, too, heard nothing and opened the door to find an empty, abandoned bedroom covered in dust. The last door remained, and they both became silent as stone as they listened for an adversary. Terran hated doing this without the king at his side. Something deep in his gut told him he was going to mess it up, make a misstep somewhere, and that it would get them both killed. He had to remember that Perseus was a professional. They were going to be fine. After a moment's hesitation, they heard nothing and opened the door. Right next to the door, a rickety chair had been planted, and a single individual sat there gazing at a fire pit that had been lit at the side of the room. Perseus jerked his head in the direction of the guard, and Terran wondered what would happen if they had made a mistake. What if this person was innocent? Terran lunged and attempted to grapple them, hoping to choke them and knock them out, but as soon as he did so, the person started from the chair and yelled out, slipping from Terran's grasp. Perseus leapt into action and pulled his gun back, throwing the stock of the rifle into the man's head before he could stand up entirely. This knocked the guards to their knees. Two other men poured from another door, and Terran readied himself for a fight. The small room was littered with old and dusty furniture, and one of the assailants tripped over the leg of another chair as they lunged at Perseus with a crude spear made of broken glass. They were no better than common criminals, and Terran shook his head. Perhaps this would not be as hard as he thought. Perseus deftly dodged underneath another crudely made club and stepped out of Terran's way to make more room to fight. Terran realized that in the scuffle he had lost track of his original target, who had decided to hide somewhere in the room. The other two froze as Terran pulled a card from his pocket, and as soon as the magic had circulated through his heart like a crack of thunder, he put his hand out in front of him. With a rumble, the ground began to shake, and everyone in the room was tossed into the air as if an earthquake had rumbled beneath the house. The earth cracked and shifted, breaking into great chunks and knocking the furniture about. One of the criminals caught themselves on a chair, and Perseus stumbled against the wall, but the other tumbled to the ground and bashed their head on a nearby table. In the chaos, Perseus raised his rifle and pointed it at the only man left standing. "Stand down," he shouted. With hesitancy, the criminal put their hands above their head. "Where are they?" Terran demanded. "The one you captured." Now, boys," someone cooed. "Put your toys down and let's talk." Terran turned to find someone leaning in the doorway, another stranger, and this one well armed. The figure stood there, cloaked in all white, and Terran froze. Red hair. His heart flipped in his chest, but it was not Lexus. There was no way it could be. A member of the king's crew? No, he thought as his eyes traced the man's outfit. An ancient symbol that Terran occasionally saw on the backs of cards in his books adorned the chest of the man's tunic, and the stranger nodded his head at his mercenaries who stepped out of the way. "So, you come into my house and make such a ruckus. I'd report you to the guard, but..." His blue eyes shifted to Perseus's face. "Looks like you're already here." "The one with the violet hair, where are they?" Terran asked again. "Now, why would I tell you that?" The man crossed his arms and pursed his thin lips together. "Especially when there's nothing in it for me. And you did such a fine job beating up my boys." Terran scoffed under his breath. "Extortion, huh?" "Naturally. I heard rumblings, Sovereign. I saw a stranger wandering around Sagano not too long ago and was intrigued. When you took special interest in them, I just couldn't resist. I needed to know what was so special about them." "And you are?" "Kelly is the name." "How dare you wear those robes? That color belongs to the king's men." You're a policeman for the color white now, Sovereign? He snapped, resting a hand on one of the clubs that he carried at his waist. You just bashed in the face of my hired help. You abducted someone. We should have you taken in for that, Perseus spat. Don't disrespect the council member. What is it you want, exactly? Terran asked. I wanted answers. Your people don't necessarily have the best reputation for giving the people the truth. Talbot lied to us for as long as he was in office, and your parents lied to us for a long time before that. What's to say that you aren't lying to us now? Terran gritted his teeth but said nothing. Now was not the time. You want to explain to me why this kid is claiming that they're from beyond the wall? That there are people out there? Billions of people? That's what I'm trying to figure out. If this got out, people would have your head. I know. Did you know? No. Kelly's eyes traced Terran's face for answers and seemed to find his response sufficient. I heard Widow Mag has taken special interest in you, too. You seem to hear a lot of things. I keep my ear pretty close to the ground. Here's my proposition. If there is something out there, I want out of this city. Opportunities are running thin and people are about to start killing each other for space. I want to be the first to see the outside. Hey, Aqua, thank you so much for that sub. Welcome to the 11th month club. How you doing? Welcome in. Perseus and Terran exchanged glances, and Terran shifted nervously where he stood. Did you work for the king? Sometimes. Sometimes I worked for the guard. It really depended on who had the most money. Ah, a mercenary then. Of sorts. I'll gladly give the kid back if you take me with you outside of the city, me and my engineer. Why? I have my reasons as you have yours. Do we have a deal? Perseus lowered his rifle and said, Bring them up and we'll talk. Roomy! Kelly called back into the other room. Bring the kid. After a few moments, someone who was far too short to be dragging Ami's towering frame heaved them into the main room and tossed them onto the floor. Seriously, I just want to go home, Ami whined. I don't know how many times I have to tell you I'm not a kid. I'm a fully grown adult. I just live in an RV with my mom. As you've said. Rumi, who adjusted a brightly colored scarf on her head, rolled her eyes. You won't shut up about it. What happened in here? Ami asked, looking around at the toppled furniture and cracked floor. They're alive, as you can see, Kella chuckled, picking Ami up from the floor by their ropes. Now, do we have a deal? Can you hold your own? Terran probed. I suppose you'll have to find out, won't you? So many annoying mercenaries in this. Been doing good, juggling a lot recently. Yeah, I imagine you're gearing up for finals. Well, welcome in. We're listening to the fourth of Court of Snakes, Bitter Truth, Honey Justice. So if you like it, share it with your friends. I'm trying to get this thing fully funded before we even launch. It is a crazy dream, but if you are interested in either backing it yourself or sharing it with other folks who might be interested in it, as of right now, at the pledge levels, I have a $10 off discount for the book itself. So feel free to check it out, save the page, sign up for it if you haven't yet. Ah, God, I've completed 2 out of 7 finals. Oof! That is like so intense, though. You've got this. I believe in you. Audience, Parissa, The Palace, October of the first year. You got your list? Yeah, I have mine. Parissa looked over the notes in her hand. Terran had given them quite an interesting task. Perseus pulled on his boots, rocking the edge of the bed a little, and Parissa read over her notes again. They were going beyond the wall. She had never dreamed that the day would come in her lifetime that they would be going beyond the wall. The outsider, Ami, supposedly could show the exact door that they had come through, and hopefully, either with ingenuity or the sheer brute force of the cards, they would go on to the other side. Days ago, Parissa's eyes had torn over a note Terran found while doing some routine paperwork. She had read it again and again and again. If that note was the truth, it revealed several things. First, it opened the gateway to the possibility that there had never been other shelter sites outside of Segeno to begin with. The note that Terran found in the expedition logs clearly stated that there were not even ruins out there. There was a very large chance that particular expedition became lost due to the dust storm that they encountered, but there was also the chance that they found their way just fine using the directions they were given, and that led them to exactly what they said they found. Nothing. It was impossible to tell what was true. The second piece of enlightening information, as Taryn had bluntly pointed out, was that her father's expeditions had been nothing but exploitation. It came as no surprise to her. He took taxes away from the people, particularly the poor, and put them into his pockets rather than sending anyone out into the desert to look for much-needed supplies. He had been an absolute snake, but Parissa had known that already. The final gear that had been set into motion had been given a good kick by Ami, who as an outsider made the first piece of information false. If there were no settlements, no foundations, no ruins, as the note had said, then where did Ami come from? A commune, they had said, but now what? And that was what Taryn wanted to find out. Something was severely amiss, and Parissa felt as though she had worms in her stomach. Taryn had asked Perseus and Parissa to create a list of useful individuals to go with them to the outside just in case something went horribly, horribly wrong. Parissa had reached out to her ideal picks, people she had known in the garden, others that she knew she could trust. Perseus had assembled his own team, and they were to present it before the council before the expeditions began. In truth, she was terrified. She did not know how to feel about the other council members, not yet. Some of them, Vina and Esmond in particular, she knew very well. At least they gave her comfort while she sat in the room, back stiff and knees trembling. The others, though, made her skin crawl. How many of them were just snakes themselves? Snakes just like her father. The people from Na'a seemed to have the most issues, blinded by their privilege and jaded. They would be the hardest to convince because to them nothing was wrong. Perseus stood from the bed and gestured to their bedroom door. "Are you ready?" "I can't get any more ready, and if I continue to sit here, I'll throw up, so we might as well just go." Parissa started down the hallway toward the elevator, taking a moment to look out the glass windows over Na'a. Taryn had insisted that they move into a council member's suite, and while she liked the accommodation, something about it felt wrong. For once, a few clouds blocked the sun as they rolled slowly across the desert. From the top of the embassy tower, the sovereign was supposed to be able to see everything that was left. It was a grim sight, nothing but brown dirt and dead-looking trees beyond. There was no way any kind of settlement or civilization could exist beyond it. But Ami had to have come from somewhere. "Holy moly, what's going on?" Perseus stepped up to the window and looked down. "What?" Parissa followed her, and her breath hitched. Hundreds of people had filled the greenhouse and the courtyard at the base of the tower, and a good majority of them were pushing forward, trying to get into the throne room. Perseus did not even say anything. He just turned and bolted toward the stairs. Parissa followed suit, the two of them flying downstairs that had recently been repaired. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break while we're in the middle of ads. I just submitted my final research argument paper, 10 pages, one for every week I crashed out over it. Oh my god. 10 pages for a paper is a long paper. I think the longest one I had to write for IB was like 13 for TOK. That was a hella long paper. It was not great. I understand. My school blocked one of the sources that I used. Boo! Why? They're scared. They're little scaredy cats. That is literally so unnecessary. It was just an AMA resident talking about their stance on gender-affirming care. Wild. They're like, this is cursed. Alright. Parissa remembered the last time she had gone down them and the fire and destruction that she and Taryn had caused. Her heart pounded in her throat as Perseus tore around corner after corner, hoping to get to the bottom before some unknown and unthinkable consequence unfolded. As he barreled through the final door, he pulled his rifle from over his shoulder and dashed down the hall. Never a dull moment. Parissa and Perseus slid up to the throne room doors across polished marble, their boots squeaking out in protest as they came to a halt. The voices of the very angry crowd beyond the door echoed through the palace, and Perseus threw the doors open. They found Taryn standing on the dais that led up to the thrones, arms out in a desperate attempt to calm the people. "Please," He hollered over the throng of voices. Please, I understand you're upset. I want to address your concerns, but I can't do it when I can't hear you. Please. Surely you know what you've done, someone shouted at the front of the group. The room had filled so densely with people that there simply was not room for any more. They packed up against the walls, and Parissa put her hand in her pocket, ready to draw a card if Terran could not quell them. In all honesty, I'm in the dark. Terran put his hands above his head. Please, work with me here. You won't work with us, someone else barked. We should have known that you wouldn't be any better than your parents. Talbot was a better sovereign than you'll ever be. Parissa's gut flipped. They had to be joking. What caused this? Terran asked. Parissa could see his hands trembling from where she stood. An older man charged up the stairs and shoved his finger into Terran's chest. You're planning on strangling us even more than you already are, you ignorant boy. You seriously think that finding resources outside will be good for us? What will happen to all the people whose livelihoods depend on producing those resources? You're just going to let us starve. Hey! Perseus yelled and drew his rifle as the man stepped a little closer. Move back from the councilman. Oh, great! Another woman at the front of the crowd hollered. Now you send in your armed goons to shoot us to death? Parissa could not believe what she was seeing. She began to move toward Terran, hoping to defuse the situation when Blackwell beat her to it. He had come from another door and moved to Terran's side, placing his hand on Terran's back. Please, he called out over the crowd. Please lower your voices. We hear you. If you would like to bring up these issues, feel free to submit a formal complaint. Your concerns are valid, and in no way is this council connected with destroying the lives of hundreds of hard-working Segonites. This is merely an exploratory mission to confirm what we already know, and that's that there's nothing out there. Right, Councilman Lahal? Terran looked at Blackwell. Parissa felt like she had swallowed glass. Perseus's finger twitched on the trigger. It's exactly as Councilman Blackwell said, Terran stated. Every word he chose held weight. I am following up on some information I uncovered in old records. Sovereign Talbot was unable to find anything outside, and I want to confirm if this is true. The man who had stepped up onto the dais paused for a moment, his chest heaving in anticipation of a fight, and then he stepped back. Your days are numbered, sneak thief. We want a real sovereign, someone else spat. Not some grifter from Daya. All right, let's go home. Tell the people at the back there's nothing to see here, the man shouted. The crowd began to back out of the throne room, and the air trembled as everyone else waited for them to clear. Only after most of the people had left the throne room did Parissa hear it. The rattling. She turned to find Maze in the corner of the room, her clipboard clattering as it shook in her hands. Well, Blackwell huffed as he straightened his tunic. That was eventful. What was that? Terran stammered. He seemed stuck, as if someone had plunged him into quicksand. A very angry mob was what it was. Blackwell stepped from the dais and gestured out of the room. We have a meeting, if you don't mind. Parissa, Perseus, Terran, and eventually Maze followed Blackwell from the room, and the group of them made their way toward the elevator. Where would they even get the idea that these expeditions would take their jobs away? Parissa pressed. It doesn't make any sense. The uneducated tend to not make any sense. Someone probably heard a rumor somewhere, and it spread through their populace like fire. They crave sensationalism like a man craves water after being left in the desert. They soak it up. It doesn't matter if the rumor has any backing to it. Blackwell held the elevator door open. What did he mean? Perseus slung his rifle over his shoulder as they all piled into the elevator. A grifter from Daya. No clue. Terran's hands trembled still, so he shoved them in his pockets. It seemed he hoped that no one noticed, but Parissa did. She could only imagine how terrified that must have made him. People know I was born in Na'a. Maze shifted uncomfortably in the corner, and when she spoke, her voice barely broke a mumble. I'm sorry to mention this now, but when I heard it a week or so ago, I thought it didn't mean anything. What? There has been talk on the street. Something that was brought to my attention. Some people, especially in Atza, are suggesting that you're not the real Terran Lahal at all. They believe that Terran Lahal was assassinated for treason and that you're using the cards to disguise yourself. Take his place. Terran scoffed and shook his head. Really? Conspiracy? That's where we're at? Conspiracy is as sweet as sugar to the masses, Blackwell interjected. It makes them feel like they know something, and that knowledge somehow makes them better than everyone else. Everyone stepped from the elevator like phantoms, goosebumps on their necks, and pale in the face at the notion that they had all just dodged a riot. Before Blackwell opened the door to the council room, Taryn put his hand out in front of him. "Thank you," was all he said. "Can't have the masses burn the tower down, can we?" He chuckled. "A certain sovereign already tried to do that." Parissa found that all the other council members had already made their way to the meeting, and Shraga stood as the group entered. "What happened?" Just a regular day at the office," Blackwell joked, lowering into his seat. "Preventing riots, stopping insurrectionists from decapitating the lot of us, all in a day's work." It was as if a heat wave had blown through the room. Esmond gripped the table and Vina took his hand to steady him. "God!" Lady Blackwell gasped, passing her hand over her face. "People these days!" "Thank you all for sticking with protocol and sheltering in place," Perseus said, also taking his seat. "That could have been a disaster." Taryn nodded. "Let's just get on with the day. It'll be like it never happened." "What do they want?" "The rioters," Shraga persisted. "They are worried that Councilman Lahal's expeditions are going to take their jobs away." Blackwell adjusted some papers at his seat. "Then maybe we should call them off." "We can't." Taryn froze stiffly. "Not with this much at stake. We have to get answers for everyone. If there is a life beyond Sagano, everyone here deserves the best chance at freedom." "We already voted that the expeditions would go through. Ami, or whatever that little liar's name is in custody under the watch of Commander Perseus's men. Everything will be well. Chances are we'll find nothing out there and we can just be done with it," Blackwell stated. One glance at Shraga was enough to get them to stop pressing any further. Parissa stood. "With that being said, I'm presenting my choice of candidates for the expedition to be voted on by the rest of the council. We want Taryn and ourselves to have a well-equipped team, so I have asked Moranwi Talanis and Nia Alchaser. Moranwi is an experienced soldier, a member of the current elite guard. I trained with him and know him well. Great runner, even better fighter. Nia is a scribe and a very good one at that. We'll need someone to be able to take detailed notes and make up maps. Or make maps. Make up maps. I'm dying. Excellent." Esmond took notes, and the scratching of his calligraphy pen across parchment tickled Parissa's ears. It reminded her of a better time. A simpler time. "Who else?" Perseus cleared his throat and stood. "I was able to find an engineer. As much as I hate to waste resources on it, we'll likely need help getting through that gate. From what Ami has told me, it's fortified. Destrian Kane is his name. His wife Amos is an archivist, and I think that they'll be of great use to us." "That's all?" Lady Blackwell pressed. "Seems like a small party." "I actually have some picks that I'd like to throw in the ring as well." Taryn raised his hand to speak, and Parissa raised an eyebrow. She had not expected it. He had largely left the operation up to Perseus and herself, or so she had thought. "Speak." "I have one of the king's men I'd like to bring along, Kelle." Taryn's hand twitched on the table. Parissa's eyes darted from his hand to his face. He was lying. She had learned all his tells over time, and his hands were a huge one. "And his assistant, Rumi. They're incredible fighters and will be useful to fight off anything nasty." Blackwell nodded and raised his chin. "I'd like to send one of my own men." "I'll add them to the list," Esmond continued, writing swiftly and with large loops and swirls. "My nephew, Ural. His profession is that of a comic, but I've been tasked with teaching him some semblance of responsibility by his mother. He's utterly useless, but I figure he'd be good cannon fodder to throw at any beasts you find outside." Blackwell laughed, and a few of the other council members chuckled at the joke. "In all seriousness, you'll need equipment. Who better to haul it?" It seemed biased, Parissa thought, to include his own flesh and blood in the traveling party, but she had no say in the matter. "We shall put it to a vote, then." And then the voting began. At the end of every round of voting, Parissa's disbelief grew. This was going to be a disaster. Their party consisted of the scribe, the mechanic, the archivist, Taryn's 2 mercenaries, and Blackwell's nephew. Somehow, the elite guard was voted out. Lady Blackwell argued that they needed as many elite soldiers as possible to guard Na'a in the palace, seeing that now people wanted to burn it down. "Then it's done." Esmond closed the votes and nodded to the room. "You leave in the week." Oh, God. They don't want me learning. Oh my God. Honestly, that's wild though. I wonder their rationale behind it and why it was axed. me see if I can get more people to back this. All right. Ancestry. Terran, the palace, October of the first year. Why? Terran pored over books in the library as he looked for answers. He realized that he had never fully asked himself that question. Growing up, his parents had educated him well. He always performed with top marks in his lessons, even though he found them exceptionally dull, and he understood Sagano's foundation back to front. As a child, he had fallen into the same trap that every resident of Na'a had, never asking why. As the early morning hours started to creep up on him, the lavender light of the dawn poked its head over the top of Sagano's wall. He had stayed up far too late reading The Old Way from cover to cover, hoping to understand it. The thing started off ridiculously, with the author using a pen name that sounded like it had been drawn from a hat. As he pored through it, he learned that everything in Sagano was just that. Fake. Made up. A sham. This book had never been included in any of his studies at school, and after reading only a few chapters, he understood why. It was the most hateful text he had ever read. The first portion of the book outlined what had caused the fall of the outside world. The author of the book believed that what caused the Great War was not a struggle for power or military might, but a collapse of ideological values. There were certain values that the author held dear, that much was clear. They believed that their religious rights had been threatened, and they also felt that their own personal liberties were at risk as the country tipped into dangerous territory, a space where no one was allowed to vote on anything and where the government made decisions for everyone. That Terran understood. Talbot had dipped riskily close to that space as well. His council had consisted of people who were only interested in kissing boots, and that resulted in the people of Sagano being smothered like a dying fire. They had no personal choice. Choices were being made for them, and Talbot would have been more than happy to watch everyone in Zaya die so that the only culture that remained was Na'a's. Ironic that he'd worship a book and then become the very thing it warned against. After that was where the book lost Terran. The book then went on to blame every single group that the author could think of for everything wrong with the world, and while Terran did not understand some of the terminology, the message came across quite clearly. Certain groups of people, due to the core nature of their ideologies and cultures, religions, and traits, were the enemy. They were the cause of the underlying infection that spread through the outside like a plague, though it was unclear whether the term outside referred to a country, a governing body, or the world. Terran could not tell based on the context. So, to save themselves and the people who were like them, the author decided that the only way to keep the evil out was to put walls up before the Great War happened, before stars came down. Great weapons, the author described, not stars at all. These hunks of metal had the ability to fly great distances and strike areas with unnerving precision, though in the book they were not listed as stars. The author had compiled a list of all of these weapons of war, their model, and what Terran could only assume was a place. Blue Star was one of them, abbreviated to BLSTR and followed by a string of numbers. He understood. By isolating themselves in a part of the globe where they thought no one would ever be able to find them, they would avoid all the blasts simply by being far, far away from everyone else. And so Sagano was born. The rest of the book contained information on specific rules, tenets, and political foundations that the author believed would be essential to creating a functioning, small-scale government that ran to their standards. They even included names of a few made-up districts. Everything in Sagano was fresh and new. Bye, Aqua. Have a nice night. Thanks for stopping in. This was where it fell apart. The author believed that the city-state would need to be divided into classes, certain jobs based on education, wealth, and a myriad of other factors. This way, the people who were, as they put it, destined for progress would be able to focus on doing just that, while everyone else put food on the table and kept the city running. The list of hateful suggestions went on and on and on, and Terran found himself suddenly able to trace back every problem that he currently had with Sagano and the way it was run to its source. Lord Wraith, as he called himself, was an absolute madman. And Terran got to the end of the book where someone wrote a personal letter to anyone reading. Dear reader, I write to you as a fellow believer in the noble cause of preserving the purity of our population and as the editor of this great work. I am writing to you today to urge you to take extreme measures to safeguard the book that has brought us together in this righteous fight. Sacrifice your life if you must. The methods outlined in this book are the only way that we can keep the population aligned with progress. It is our sacred duty to preserve our heritage and culture, and this book provides us with knowledge and tools to do so. However, there are those who would seek to corrupt its vision and turn it to their own twisted ends. Therefore, I implore you to keep this book hidden away, safe from prying eyes and the corrupting influence of those who would seek to undermine our cause. It is your duty to keep this knowledge safe and to share it only with those who are true to the old way. Learn its tenets, commit them to memory, and then enforce them with everything you have. Segeno will be a shining example of what can be done if we live as we were destined to. Remember, our cause is just, and our struggle is righteous. We must remain steadfast and unyielding in our pursuit of a pure and noble society. The future of our people depends on our dedication and commitment to these principles. Yours in the cause, Christian LaHale. There was that name again, Christian LaHale. That had been the name of the CEO of the Rooks Company too, and apparently he had terrible taste in literature if he took the time to edit that piece of trash. Taryn passed his hand over his mouth as he adjusted the lamp on the table. And then an idea hit him. He stood and shuffled to the part of the library that contained Segeno's citizenry records. He looked for the oldest one that they had, and as soon as he was able to find it, covered in dust and unread for years, he lugged it back to the desk. A knock sounded across the library door. Taryn turned over his shoulder to greet whoever came in, and sure he looked like death itself, having not slept all night, and was surprised to find Blackwell there. He very quickly laid the thick citizenry tome over the top of the old way, hoping that it had not been seen. Burning the midnight oil, I see, Blackwell said as he leaned on the doorframe. Everything all right? I'm just doing some research before we go beyond the wall. I want to be prepared, as prepared as we can be. It was not exactly a lie. Good thinking. Blackwell sank into a chair next to Taryn. I couldn't sleep. No? I was thinking about what was said in the throne room today. Those people had no right to attack you in the way that they did. They are grossly misinformed. Taryn shrugged and began to look through the beginning of the book for the last name LaHale. If it's how they feel, who am I to silence them? But it isn't the truth. Truth is like a mirage, I think. Sometimes it takes people time to see the lie for what it is. I understand their concern, I suppose. Blackwell leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand, elbow on table. I would be absolutely terrified if someone came for my job. Losing those pretty white robes would be truly terrible. Taryn laughed. I jest, though. If I've had it happen to me, and without someone there to catch me, I would have died. I just remember what it was like, not knowing where your next meal was coming from, not knowing where you're sleeping that night. Taryn slowly raised his head, his finger hovering on a specific name. Is that so? When those people were calling you that name, I thought they were talking about me. I try to keep my past as far behind me as possible. I'm not necessarily proud of what I've done, but I'm here today because someone gave me a second chance. You and Talbot aren't so different then. No, Blackwell barked. His sudden hostility made Taryn jump. Talbot and I are vastly different. Talbot was an idiot who got too big for his shoes and then tripped into a sword. I, at least, have not succumbed to madness, and anyone who believes that he was a good sovereign is a fool. Taryn looked back down at the book and realized that his hand had stopped on a list of names of the initial residents of Segeno, the very first people to ever walk on its streets. May I ask what you're looking for? Blackwell asked. The name of someone who may have built the gates. I'm trying to figure out how to get through them so we don't run into a snag next week. The name? LaHale. Why, Blackwell laughed. That's your name. No, it's... Is it? Fell asleep in history, it seems. Blackwell stood to lean over Taryn, partially blocking the light from the desk lamp. The LaHales changed their name after the first sovereign was chosen, something about rejecting the traditions of the outside world, making Segeno unique. Here. Blackwell pointed to the page after running up and down the list a few times. There, sure enough, was a name. Stefan LaHale. No E. Stefan was not the name he was looking for. Is that the only one? Let's see. No, here's another one. And a few pages later, Christian LaHale. There was the correct spelling for the last name, but the first name now began with a K. You can tell that because of the missing E that Stefan was probably Christian's son. Stefan was the first sovereign of Segeno, so I can only imagine that Christian was too old or did not want to take up the mantle. His son, for whatever reason, was better equipped. Eventually, the Lahal spelling with the apostrophe became more common. I didn't know that. Amazing what you learn if you pay attention in class. Blackwell stood and gave Taryn a hearty pat on the back. You should go or get to sleep. Staying up poring over the old sovereigns won't do us any good. We'll get through the gate without the help of two dead men. And with that, he left. Taryn closed the registry and put it back on the shelf. So someone he was related to had founded Sageno, but how long ago? Taryn could only guess. He needed to do some math. That way the way that the Seganites documented their years was different than how it used to be before the Great War, but he knew that Sageno had not yet existed for 100 years. That centennial celebration would happen within his lifetime. It was supposed to be a very lucky time. Good for everyone. Supposed to be. There was no way Sageno could be good for anyone, knowing what he knew now. Shit's crazy. Racists are crazy. I'm going to take a brief break for just a second and go and grab some food. I'll be right back. All right, I am back. I have some snacks and some milk. Let me throw another handful of nuts in my mouth. That's what she said. All right. I'm going to finish chewing so things aren't nasty. Yum, yum, yum. Almost there. Sorry, I'm dying. Okay. The wall. Parissa. The gate. October of the first year. Parissa pressed her fingertips to her lips as she watched the mechanic look over the door that Ami had come through. Perseus held on to Ami's wrist, which had been securely cuffed, and looked at the scene with a glare that gave Parissa chills, as though he hoped to bore through the gate with his stare alone. After what seemed like forever among the mumbling of the crowd that had gathered to watch the scene and the coveted chill of the late fall, the mechanic stood. The dog he had brought with him, a white dog with a loving face that followed him wherever he went and waited patiently by his side while he worked, barked as he stood. Plumes of sand rose from the mechanic's gloves as he patted them together, a look of doubt on his face. "Well," Destrian said as he stroked the mustache that lifted up from the corners of his mouth like a smile, "this thing sure is a marvel, that's for sure." Also, I'd like to take a moment to shout out to my Uncle John, who was responsible for naming and making this character Destrian. He unfortunately passed away like about a month ago, so R.I.P. Uncle John. "How do you mean?" Taryn pressed. "Can you get through it?" "I sure as hell can try. Seems as there are 2 hinges on the other side and some kind of locking mechanism to release, or release system that's keeping it shut. It was designed to be a one-way door. We need a lot of explosives to get through here, and I'm willing to give that a try, but there is a chance that if we go too hard on it, the structures around us that use this exterior wall as support could be damaged." "There's a risk we'll destroy people's homes?" Potentially." Taryn passed his hands over his eyes. "Great." "We could try the cards," Parissa suggested. The cards were still novel to her. Taryn had spent years with them and had studied them extensively under the king, so maybe he knew something that she did not. Still, she thought it was worth a try if their technology was incapable of opening the gate. "What did it look like on the other side?" Perseus asked Ami, shaking them a little to get their attention. Ami stuttered. "Exactly as the old guy said. Big old hinges and some kind of turning bolt on the other side. I had to throw my shoulder into the central lock portion to get it open. I almost couldn't do it. It was so heavy. Well, once I did that, the wheel for the bolt turned and the door opened. It was thick as hell and heavy. Too heavy, because that's why it closed behind me when I went through." Terran nodded and turned his attention to Destrian. "Do it. Blast it open." "I'll start loading up the explosives." Destrian shuffled off to work, his faithful dog following behind him and carrying bundles of explosives in his mouth. Blackwell, from somewhere in the crowd, barked, "Ural, front and center." "Yes, Uncle Tyron?" A young man with skin kissed by the sun rushed out of the crowd to his uncle's side. I'm going to go ahead and take a brief break here for just a second. This expedition's gonna be disastrous. Why is this happening? Why? I'm trying to troubleshoot some ads. You know what? I don't claim to understand what's going on, but I'm doing my best. All right, looks like we're back. Okay. Parissa raised her eyebrows. He was like her, a product of 2 worlds. Someone must have married into Na'a in his family, just like her mother had. He raked his hands through his thick, dark hair, and Blackwell pointed expectantly at the wall. "Well?" he pushed. Get to it. Go help. Right away. Ural dashed off and danced around Destrian as the explosives were moved, every movement unsure, like he had never done any hard labor in his life. Parissa studied him, understanding him. She was sure he had grown up just like she had, protected from the outside world and fed sugar and honey thanks to the wealthy side of his family. Her eyes slid to Blackwell, whose fair skin had already begun to redden in the sun, despite it being nearly winter. He held a lot of secrets, she was sure. I wanted to be a chemist at some point, you know, Ural ranted. I was going to learn how to make explosives for the Guard. Why didn't you finish? Destrian asked. It didn't suit me, Ural huffed as he struggled to pick up a bundle of explosives that the dog seemed to carry with ease. He was small, Parissa thought, but not that small. I'm much more suited to using my tongue than my hands. I'd love to be a writer, or a comic, maybe a poet. My friend, he's the one who told me to get out of the chemistry business, is a weaponsmith for the Guard. You know, he's got a holiday sale going on right now if you're interested. The mechanic raised a gray eyebrow, but continued to work. He's selling explosives for $1 each. It's quite the bang for your buck. The mechanic froze as if he had a bucket of ice-cold water dumped on him. Oh my God, Perseus muttered under his breath. Parissa, Terran mumbled as he pulled her aside from the crowd. We need to be ready to brace these buildings. With the carts? Her fingers twitched in anticipation. I can't have anything going wrong. These people want to drag me through the street, so we have to make sure that this goes exactly according to plan. That guy sure is loading up a lot of explosives. Terran looked over his shoulder at the now pile of explosives that Destrian had stacked up against the gate. He swallowed thickly. This better work. I'll go to the right side, you go to the left, Parissa suggested. We'll be okay. Clear for the blast, Destrian cried. Get out of the way. The crowd backed up and Destrian began to run a line from his pile of explosives to a detonator. Perseus had spared no expenses in supplying the man with enough explosives to wipe out an entire district. Parissa stood as far away as she could without being in the blast radius, and the mechanic's wife, Amas, pulled her back a little more. Just a touch further back, dear, she suggested. Blasting in 3, Destrian called. Blackwell covered his ears. 2. Ami winced and turned their face away from the explosion. 1. Destrian plunged the detonator and an earth-shaking explosion rocketed across the ground. A black scorch mark the size of the wall itself danced its way up the metal, and sand churned up into the air in a thick cloud. Metal ringing echoed through Parissa's head, and she covered her ears, coughing and waving dust away. And then she heard it, a rumble behind her. She spun around as the foundation of the crumbly Atzen building cracked, and that small crack turned into a larger one. That large crack jumped its way up the side of the building, and then it began to slide. Damn it, she cried out. Terran, we have got a building going down. She threw a card onto the back of her hand out of reflex now, and the chilling sensation of the black ink of her card dripping its way into her skin cooled even her bones. Icy heat prickled its way across her back, and suddenly she felt very heavy. As she looked over her shoulders to see what had happened, she found a pair of massive wings that exploded through her armor, made of shards of light and glass. She had seen Terran use this exact card a year ago. Lucky. Like moving one of her own muscles, she beat them impulsively, finding that they did what she needed them to on command. Welcome in, Femboy. We're reading my new and upcoming book, Court of Snakes, Bitter Truth, Honeyed Justice, which is coming out on the 28th of May. I'll tell you a little bit more about the book once we get done with this chapter. Parissa leapt into the air, wings beating furiously as she threw her entire body into the top part of the building as it slid. Her wings beat rhythmically, dust swirling around her as the power of her new appendages moved with such force that she found she was able to hold the building. Parissa, Terran called from somewhere behind her. Do you have it? It's slipping, she cried, a little more desperately than she would have liked. The air around her crackled with electricity, and something entered her periphery. When she glanced to see what it was, she found it was a rock, floating upward and away from the ground. And then there came another, and another. Terran dashed past her in the air, robes trailing behind him, his feet planted securely on something. Huge pieces of cobblestone. Hand extended in front of him, he lifted the chunks of rock with a glowing aura radiating off of them and the gauntlet created by his cards, and dashed up from the ground to Parissa's side. With a roar, he clenched his hands into fists, the blue glow shooting sparks into the atmosphere, and slammed them into the side of the building. With the rocks pushing up against his feet acting as a counterweight, Terran braced with Parissa grunting under the weight of the adobe and wood. Parissa's wings beat and the crowd beneath them held their breath as they struggled to right the building. Eventually, inch by inch, Terran and Parissa were able to push the building back into place, sturdy and secure on its foundation. And after hovering her hands above the stucco for just a moment to make sure the building would not try anything else, Parissa flew back and away from it. The crowd all heaved a collective sigh of relief, and the two of them landed back at the edge of the blast zone. Oh my god? Ami's jaw dropped open so far it almost touched the ground. You flew! You moved rocks with your mind! Impressive, Blackwell quipped. I heard the cards were powerful, but have never gotten to see them in person. Bad news, everyone, Destrian called from the gate. These explosives did jack squat. What? Perseus charged to the gate with Ami in tow, nearly tripping over their long legs as he dragged them along. He ran his white glove over the black scorch mark that was left behind. Wow. No kidding. If we can't get through, we should just call it off, Shraga called from the crowd. Terran stormed to the gate. I'm not giving up yet. Another card fused with his skin, and Perseus stepped back from him to give him space to work. His hands glowed again, and his hair lifted from his head as if caught in the wind. Parissa had honestly not ever seen anything like it. Could it be possible that one could get more powerful using the cards over time? The only other person she had ever seen exhibit that kind of power was the king. With fury, Terran struck the wall with his fists. Each strike cracked out like lightning and flew so fast they were almost impossible to see. The metal, after several blows, began to buckle and bend. Sweat formed on his brow, and his heels dug into the sand as he unleashed his fury on the door until finally, after what seemed like forever, Terran's strikes slowed and his fist punched through the metal. He collapsed onto his knees, face dripping in sweat and knuckles black and blue from hitting the wall. But somehow his hands had not broken. Parissa rushed to his side and helped him stand, his knees no more effective than cooked noodles, and Perseus reached into the hole with his free arm. After feeling around for a moment, he said, I feel the latch. After letting go of Ami, he pointed at them with a stern finger. Don't run off. Ami nodded hastily, and Perseus jammed his foot up against a corner of the building next to the door, the one that had not decided to almost collapse. With a hearty shove, something clicked, and a hiss and a pop echoed throughout the area. After a moment, Perseus jerked his arm from the hole, and the gate swung open. It led to a service tunnel, just as Ami had said. All right, everyone, Perseus called. The time is now. Let's get ready to go. The party began to assemble and collect their goods, and one of the mercenaries Terran had hired approached behind the three of them, his eyebrow raised. That was quite an impressive display, Your Majesty, he cooed as he pulled his white cloak about himself. Put that on your list of reasons to not get on my bad side, Terran barked, irritable and worn out. Parissa, someone called from over her shoulder. Esmond stepped to their side as Terran scrambled to stand, attempting to regain his strength. She got a good look at her teacher, who had changed very little over the last few years. He had a few more gray hairs, a couple more fine wrinkles around his eyes, but otherwise had remained the same. He said nothing, and yanked her into a huge hug, his long limbs engulfing her as he held her there. The smell of sage that followed him everywhere he went filled her nose, and she settled into the hug. If you go out there and die, it'll break my heart, he said. I'll be fine. The cards will protect us. We'll protect each other. I know, You're just one of the only important things I have left. Parissa looked up at him, her eyes sparkling. There's something I've wanted to say to you for a long time. You know. Is that so? I've realized I've grown a lot over the last few years, and we've had less and less time to spend with each other. Even though I'm doing all these adult things, I can't believe I'm engaged now. You've been there. You've always been there. Esmond nodded slowly, his glasses slipping a little on his nose. I always will be. I love you, Esmond. She gave him another hug, as if she could breathe a little steadiness into his body. My father could have only dreamed of being as wonderful as you. A smile broke on Esmond's lips, and he released from the embrace, gesturing toward the gate. You best get going. The sooner you get back, the sooner I can stop worrying. So welcome in. Yeah, welcome in, Femboy. We're reading, as I said, my book, Court of Snakes. It comes out on the 28th, and it hasn't even launched on BackerKit yet, and it's already 30% funded, which is crazy. So many thanks to my early supporters. As it says here, Court of Snakes is a YA political dystopian fantasy I'm releasing the second book. The first one's been published for a while, but the most important and most special part about this campaign is that this is a duology. It's an omnibus. So this whole thing comes in this very fancy special edition version of the book. So I do have it here. It is crazy. This is the most insane thing I've ever made in my life. Everything was made by me. All the illustrations, all of the sprayed edges. This thing comes with like a little fancy bookmark flap, which is very exciting. It's got end papers, custom end papers. And most importantly, it has, for the first time, my full color illustrations in it. I've never been able to have these in a book because they're just too darn expensive to print. So I am just absolutely thrilled that this thing gets to live. I'm just so stoked. And it's really exciting to be able to, like, actually have all of this stuff together in one volume. So point being, if you are looking to back a project, as of right now, I'm offering a $10 off coupon for everybody who backs early. No pressure. If you know people who like to read and maybe would be interested in something like this, feel free to let me know and I can send you a share link to follow the project for free. So, yeah, let me know if you want any of those links. But, what was I going to do? I don't think anything crazy. I think my brain was thinking that I had something, I was remembering something, but I forgot. I don't know what it was. I don't know. But to summarize the setting in the first book, the, like, I guess quick logline for this story is that Taryn and Parissa are two teenagers trapped in what they believe to be the last city on Earth after a great war. And they're slowly taking down political corruption inside this city. Lots of rebellion, lots of people dying, and most importantly, lots of tarot card magic. So you can read more about the series on my website and also read samples of the book there as well. All right. Beyond. Taryn, the outside, October of the first year. Taryn raised his hand to block the sun, the unrelenting heat, pushing down on all of them as they walked. He had entirely underestimated the temperature and had not realized how much the buildings of Segeno, even the short ones, provided shade. He found himself sweating from the effort of walking despite the cooler air. And it was going to be a long walk. As far as his notes had said, the last expedition had traveled south from Segeno to a place that was supposedly good for acquiring clean spring water. That place, however, was nearly 25 miles away, and they moved at a tortoise's pace. They walked along the foothills of a small mountain range that Taryn had seen from the top of the embassy tower many times and lumbered on toward the south. I go to sleep now. It's late. That is A-okay. And if you do want to back the book, here's the link for you. You can follow that special link, and I'm giving discounts to all of the people in stream that are early access folks. So feel free to check that out, and thanks for stopping in. That pace, oh yes, they walked along the foothills of a small mountain range that Taryn had seen from the top of the embassy tower many times and lumbered on toward the south. The ox they brought dragged a cart along the rough and bumpy trail laden with cacti, brush, and rough terrain, and the archivist in her old age had decided to sit atop it rather than walk. Her husband had stayed behind to clean up the explosives. Nia, the scribe, pushed her red hair out of her face as her eyes tore over her writing, scribbling as she walked. She took down everything, every plant, every rock, every animal. For a moment, Taryn remembered how Lexus used to pore over his own books, and he found himself staring at her. Her green eyes met his for just a moment, and her cheeks flushed as they looked at each other. He hoped she had not gotten the wrong idea. He was trapped in the past, not hoping for the future. He turned his face away and back toward the dusty trail ahead of them. It was going to be a long day. Hey, I actually know a little bit about this place from my studies if anyone wants to hear some fun desert facts, Ural stated, breaking the silence. No one responded. Did you know it actually gets so hot out here that there are only 2 seasons? The archivist narrowed her eyes. I've got plenty of books about the weather back at my library, and I've never seen... No, I'm serious, Ural insisted. Even children's books talk about them. The 2 Segonite seasons. Hot and hotter. The entire desert fell so quiet that the lone screech of a large bird that had been circling overhead sounded like a gunshot in the awkward silence. Taryn shook his head and ignored him. They had been walking for almost 4 hours now, and he could feel the skin on his nose starting to burn. Fortunately, his tunic covered his arms, but that did not prevent him from sweating. In October, very few clouds rolled across the sky, meaning no cover protected them from the elements. He took a swig from his canteen and passed his hand over his face. Maybe this was a bad idea. "Oh, hey," Ami muttered almost to themselves. "I know where this is. Sort of." "What?" Taryn turned to them as they sat in the cart with the archivist rocking violently as the cart went over an intense bump. "I'm pretty sure if we cut through the mountains, we could get to Double Hot Springs." "What's that?" It's a... Well, I don't want to say a popular landmark, but it's kind of a fun place to go with friends if you have dirt bikes or an ATV. Dirt bikes? Ami made a face like they were trying to jump through hoops in their head. "It's a cart with 2 wheels and it's powered by gasoline." Taryn shook his head. "It's okay, you're either the best liar in the world or what you're trying to explain I won't understand until I see it." Speaking of that, Ami leaned forward and lowered their voice. "Back at the gate, you and the girl, Parissa. Yeah, you two, how did you..." "Oh, the magic?" Taryn pulled his cards from his pocket. "I get my magic from these." "Tarot? You know them?" Taryn's stomach flipped, another unexpected turn. "Yeah, my mom does tarot readings online for money." Taryn shook his head, stunned. He was sure he looked like he had been hit by lightning. "She uses..." Ami raised an uncertain eyebrow. "That's a weird way to put it, but I guess she's always been kind of psychic and picked up tarot young. She's really good." "What's her significator?" "Her what?" "Her significator?" Taryn raised the back of his hair, which had grown nearly long enough to touch his shoulders, to reveal his significator tattoo. The silvery lines of his tarot's pattern traced its way on his skin, still slightly raised. He could feel the outline of the staff and the diamond without looking at it. "You know, her chosen suit." "I don't know anything about that. Holy crap!" Ami squinted and leaned closer, nearly falling out of the cart. "Is that metal?" "In order to use the cards in the way I do, you have to have a significator. Without a significator, the cards are just paper. Something about the cards gives them a little bit of sentience, lets them choose you as a user. It's a lot of power to have. Once you've been chosen, you are bound to a specific deck. Then, when you choose a card and place it onto your skin, the magic activates. I put it on my hand for practicality as I was taught, but apparently users before my master used to put it on other parts of their body like their chest." "No frickin' way. How long have you been able to do magic?" Only a few years." "And Parissa?" "Less than that. She's pretty new." "How many of you are there?" "Only the 2 of us. It's a rare skill, and the decks are even rarer, so it's kind of a dying art." Ami nodded and wiped sweat from their forehead. "I'll have to introduce you to my mom sometime. She'll like you. Maybe she can do the magic too." "So where's this place you're from anyway?" "Well, we're headed to Double Hot Springs. Just south of that is Black Rock Point. Then if you head across the playa..." "Playa?" It means beach in Spanish, but when we talk about the desert, because this thing used to be a giant ancient lake, it's used in reference to the flat area that was the bottom like 1,000,000 years ago." "It's true," the archivist said. "Books describe this whole area as one ancient lake bed filled with creatures of unimaginable size. You can still find the bones of the great ancient ones at the bottom. But yeah, when you hit the playa, you can cut east to Sulphur. That's where my commune is. I'd say it's about 15 miles from here, near the fence." Every single thing that Ami said twisted Taryn's brain into a knot. Perseus walked alongside the cart, and Taryn watched him strain to hear every word that Ami said. Perseus's mind was a steel trap, so Taryn was sure that this intel would be stored for later recording in the guard's records. "The fence," Ami clarified. "There's a big one that cuts off Double Hot Springs from the Black Rock Range, and it goes all the way up to where Sulphur is, and then follows the Jackson Mountains. I always thought this place was like Area 51 or something." "Area 51? Taryn tripped on a large rock and barely caught himself with the cart. "It's south of us, too. Probably one of the most famous places in Nevada." "Are you getting all of this?" Taryn called to the scribe. "On it," Nia replied, riding and walking at the same time, a skill which Taryn believed very few possessed. Ami paused for a moment to give her a chance to catch up and then continued. "Area 51 is this super secret government facility that no one is allowed to go into, with all the huge barbed wire fences around the perimeter of Sagano, you said? I just figured that it was government run, too. There are signs all over the place that say things like, 'No trespassing beyond this point,' or 'It is unlawful to enter this area without the permission of the United States military.' I saw a sign that said, military installation, too, I think." Whoopsie, this is a mistake. Let me mark that down. I don't know what happened to me there, but all right. Terran shook his head and took it all in. Christian LaHale, very clearly, had not wanted anyone to get anywhere near Sageno, but that was decades ago. How was it that the border of this place was maintained for that long? Look, Ami said as they pointed with both hands, their manacles shifting around their wrists. You can even see the fence from here. And they were right. If Terran squinted, he could barely make out a tall line that cut the horizon. A few other large black shapes, probably big cacti, dotted the ground closer to them. Within the hour, they would reach the cacti, and then shortly after, the fence. What was important, though, was that Ani had not lied. They said there was a fence, and there it was. If that was true, then Terran could only assume that everything else they had said also held truth. They walked on in silence for just a little while longer, and as they approached the final threshold, the only thing keeping Terran and his group from the outside world, Terran's skin began to crawl. This was it. This was the final turning point. This would define his legacy. Hey, Ural chuckled. Are we getting close to any kind of water source? Why, did you run out? Parissa snapped. Terran had known she was bitter about bringing him along the moment the vote was decided. In truth, he had not been that much of a burden, but he was not adding anything to the expedition, that was certain. He had merely been away for Blackwell to secure an inside man. We told you to pack enough for the day. I'm fine, but it reminds me of a story that I heard once. Great, here we go, Perseus muttered under his breath. A guy was once lost in the desert, desperate for water, obviously. He saw something far off in the distance, and hoping to find water, he walked toward it, only to find a little old man sitting at a card table with a bunch of neckties laid out on it. Only a little longer now. The group trudged ever closer to the cacti, but as they did, Terran found that they changed a little in shape. What he had thought to be the arms of the cacti bent and twisted to form something else. Something more recognizable. So, the guy asked, Please, I'm dying of thirst. Can I have some water? And you know what the old guy said? I don't have any water, but why don't you buy a tie? This one goes great with your shirt. Super awkward. Terran, a knot forming in his stomach, slowly drew a card. Something was wrong. The guy shouted, You idiot! I don't want a tie, I need water, I'm dying here. And the old man had the worst answer. I'll be right back, Terran muttered as Ural continued to ramble on. Go to that dune over there, about 15 miles down. My brother runs an upscale restaurant. Go over that way, and they'll give you all the water you want. As soon as the card touched Terran's skin, a familiar sensation of magic taking hold shot through his body. It almost felt like a warm hug to him, wrapping him in light like he had never experienced. In a moment, he knew he was not himself. He did not have to look at his own body to see what had been done, but understood that a change had happened. He was all too familiar with the magician. With a beat of new wings and human no longer, Terran took off toward the sky, his eyes suddenly better equipped for seeing as far as he wanted. He glided with the wind under his wings, the air much cooler the higher he soared. Before long, he had flown far enough away from the group to be able to see what lay in the distance. His shadow, now distinctly that of a hawk, circled above what he had thought to be cacti. Around and around he went, making sure his eyes had not lied to him. They did not. Not the arms of cacti, but the arms of people, stretched toward the sky in twisted positions. The bodies of the people had been scorched to black. They stood on pedestals, all identical in size and shape. Terran's small avian heart beat in his feathered chest, and he flew as quickly as he could back to the others. In only a moment he felt the card fade, the cool silvery metal unwrapping itself from his hand. As soon as he had returned, Ural finished. 3 hours later, the guy came crawling back to where the old man had sat behind his card table. I found the restaurant, he said. They wouldn't let me in without a tie. We have an emergency, Terran interrupted. Stop the cart. Without saying anything, Terran marched off toward the figures he had seen. Crazy. Don't light people on fire, guys. Don't do it. Burnt. Parissa, the outside, October of the first year. Parissa covered her mouth as she looked upon what Terran had found. They had gone ahead. She, Perseus, Ami, and Terran did not spook the others. Whatever Terran had found was terrifying, and he could not risk the others seeing. She now understood why. These bodies were horrendously positioned. They stood taller than the average person, but their flesh had been burnt so badly that no features remained. Just looking at them sent a chill up Parissa's spine, and Perseus muttered under his breath, "Are these desert giants? Like from the stories?" No. No, Terran said with as much resolution as he could muster. "Those don't exist." "This is super creepy, bro." Ami tapped their shoes into the sand, looking as though they wanted to bolt. "I don't like this one bit." "Well, you're the expert from outside," Parissa pressed. "What are these?" "How the hell should I know? I came up the maintained road, not this close to the mountains. I didn't pass by here when I initially came y'all's way." Parissa walked around the figures, thankful they were not alive. The question was, how did they get there? Why were they there? Had they been alive at some point? She hoped not. What it looked like was a ritual sacrifice. It looked as though people, though they were very large, had been strapped to the pedestals they stood upon and set ablaze. The scorch marks from the original fire bloomed out from the scene in all directions, indicating that the fire had been quite large, and a lot of the brush around the figures had been cleared to not set the entire playa, as Ami had called it, ablaze. "What do we tell the others?" Parissa took Perseus's hand. Whether he wanted to or not, he looked terrified. His free hand balled into a fist, and Parissa practically had to pry his fingers open to slip her finger in between them. Her fingers, in between them. "We don't." Terran shook his head in resolution. "This is now highly sensitive information." "I can hold a meeting on it when we get back to the city," Perseus offered. "It very clearly isn't safe out here for us." "Clearly not." "Y'all, it's not that bad," Ami assured. "You're all gonna be fine." Parissa pointed aggressively at the bodies. "They lit people on fire. If these are the kinds of people who are out there, it's probably safer for the average citizen to stay within Sagano's walls until we figure this out." "Come here." Ami began to drag Perseus from Parissa's grip and toward the bodies. "Whoa!" Perseus dug his heels into the sand and leaned hard against Ami's weight. Ami's height alone gave them good leverage, and the two of them kicked up dust as they struggled. "Hold it right there." "Just trust me." Ami soldiered forth, and Terran reflexively drew a card, sensing trouble. In one swift movement, Perseus released Ami and pulled his rifle from over his shoulder, aiming it directly at Ami's head. "I said hold it." "God, man!" Ami raised their hands above their head and froze. "Chill out." "No, you chill out. Where are you going?" "Another mistake." "That's okay, that's why we do this. Now the final version isn't gonna suck." I swear I thought there was going to be an ad playing, but apparently not yet. Just trust me. Look, these things aren't people." Perseus held his rifle steady as Ami backed toward the bodies. "Oh, there it is." Okay, I'm going to wait for just a second. Only a little more. I'm gonna drink some more milk. Nice. All right. Parissa was sure they were going to bolt. She knew Perseus would not shoot, but that did not mean that Terran would not give chase. Ami was an incredibly valuable resource, one that Terran was not eager to let go. or let go so easily. After Ami seemed certain that Perseus was not going to shoot them in the head, they strode to the bodies, looked them up and down, and then very simply knocked on one of them with their knuckles. Parissa's eyebrow raised in surprise as a familiar sound rang out across the desert. Hollow wood. Ha! Ami knocked on it again. That's what I thought. Is that wood? Parissa jogged to meet them and touched the bodies herself. Sure enough, her ears did not lie. What she felt under her fingertips ran rough and charred, certainly, but it was wood. No doubt in her mind. Burnt wood. Man, I'm so sorry, y'all. Ami laughed. This is no joke. The worst thing to come upon is your virgin experience outside. Perseus came to feel the statues for himself, and Terran held behind. Are you going to enlighten us, or are you going to keep it to yourself? So, let me see if I can explain this in the best way I can. There's a music festival called Burning Man. Hundreds of people go, and it's in the desert not too far from here. People build massive pieces of art and put them on display, and sometimes there are big fire shows. These are art? Most likely. I'm sure somebody got high, decided they wanted to go raid the government facility, set up the art, burned it, and then left. Parissa rolled her eyes. Everything about this situation was a disaster. She knew very well that Widow Mag had demanded that they report back to her once the search party returned, and something this terrifying did not look good. The people of Sagano were who were more superstitious would lose their minds. Ah, look. Ami bent down, and Perseus instinctively flicked his rifle back into position. When Ami righted themselves, they held up a metal object in their hand. What is that? Perseus demanded. The object had text on it, and from where Parissa stood, she could barely make out the word light. It's a beer can, Ami explained. People were definitely here doing stupid stuff. No worries. Ami showed it to the three of them after jogging back, and while Parissa did not understand the words on the can or what it all meant, it clearly was a beverage. So now what? Perseus asked. Well, we can't tell them, Terran insisted. The others back at the wagon, they won't believe us. Somehow, we have to appease Blackwell and Widow Mag. They won't be satisfied knowing we didn't even go the entire distance. The sun will be going down soon, and we need to build camp. Terran passed his hand over his face. You're going to tell Blackwell the truth, but only Blackwell for now. Oh? I wish it were better, but I think we should bring that scribe over here, get her to sign a silence order. She can record everything she's seen, the can, the art, everything, and we can report that to Blackwell, the council, and Widow Mag. Everyone else is going to be told that there was nothing here but the carcass of a burnt cactus. I'll go get her. Ami, are you going to stay put? Aye, aye, Captain, they said, saluting with their bound hands. Is that a yes? No, dude, I'm just going to run off into the desert with no water, no tent, no sleeping bag, and no food. Yes, that's a yes. Perseus squinted his eyes at them and started the short walk back toward the rest of the expedition. When he comes back with the scribe, Terran continued, and after she's recorded everything she needs, I want you and Perseus to go with the expedition back to Sagano. Tell them that, very clearly, there is no settlement here, never was. I suppose that's the truth, Parissa sighed. And what about you? Ami and I are going to Sulphur. Ami raised an eyebrow. Right, because it's going to look real good if I show up back home in handcuffs. I'll get them off you. You've proven your worth. I don't think you'll run away anyway. Are you guys going to give me my ATV back? All of this is going on, and that's what you're concerned about? Parissa huffed, rolling her eyes. It was expensive. Terran merely laced his hands. While he appeared calm on the surface, Parissa could sense a storm brewing. Hopefully, after I confirm what you've had to say, you can come back to Sagano with me. Then, Parissa pressed her lips together. Her nerves had made them dry. Then we'll know the truth. Sulphur. Terran. The outside. October of the first year. Taryn covered his eyes as he looked away from the sunrise, the periwinkle and rose hues dancing on his eyelashes and white robes. The group that he had come into the desert with slowly rambled their way back north, back towards Sageno. Perseus and Parissa are with them. Parissa looked back over her shoulder at him one more time, and then they were too far to keep an eye on. This was it. Ami clapped him on the shoulder. Taryn looked up at them, and they nodded their head in the direction of home. Come on, Taryn, we got like 5-ish hours of walking ahead of us. Not if we don't have to. Taryn drew a card from his pocket, hoping that it would provide him some insight. Do you go to those things for everything? Ami asked. Only when they'll let me. Taryn flipped a card to look at the surface. 4 of wands. Oh, nice. Sticks. Is there any special meaning to the sticks? This is the card of community. We're going to your home. Taryn placed the card on the back of his own hand, and as soon as the metal had set and the air began to sparkle with the usual electricity of magic, Taryn held his left hand out to Ami. Hold on to me. Ami put their hand up, but hung there, hesitant and afraid. You'll be fine. Just trust me. Last time I go somewhere I'm not supposed to on my ATV. As soon as Taryn took Ami's hand, an explosion of color danced out from beneath their feet on the ground. Rhomboid patterns shot across the desert sand, and the air seemed to darken around them as light beamed from the ground. Then the desert was plunged into darkness. Taryn and Ami hovered in nothingness for a moment, their hair rising away from their ears and upward into the sky as if they were underwater. Ami clutched Taryn's hand as particles of light and reflective shards, like 1,000 broken pieces of stained glass, gently coalesced around them, leaving hot, burning kisses as they brushed past skin. And then, the two of them came slamming down onto the ground with surprising force. Taryn's knees buckled as they were deposited on new, different sand, and Ami stumbled to their knees. When the world finally settled and the blistering brightness of the sun returned to their eyes, Taryn looked around at the most unappealing wasteland he had ever seen. And he thought Zaya was bad. Nothing but brown dirt stretched out before him, and a few buildings that looked like they belonged in Zaya fell upon themselves. At a separate plot of dirt adjacent to the old sun-blasted buildings stood a collection of homes like Taryn had never seen. Long, rectangular shapes on wheels, all packed together, lined the road, and people milled about, sat under awnings, and worked in raised garden beds. Small children played, and animals darted about, but no one paused or looked up as the two of them approached. People. There were dozens of people living there. Suddenly, the Segonites were no longer alone. What they had been told for decades came crashing down around Taryn in waves, and his heart trembled in his chest. Exhilaration and terror swelled in him like a heat wave, and he ground his teeth together. Taryn very quickly realized that he stood out like a sore thumb. These people wore thick blue pants, boots like Ami's, and shirts with cropped sleeves covered in art and words. Taryn's robes blew about him, and he raised his chin. Time to pretend he knew what he was doing. He and Ami strode toward one of the long-wheeled houses, and as soon as they stepped under the shade of an awning that extended from the side of it, Taryn heaved a sigh of relief and wiped his forehead from the sun. Ami knocked on the door to the building and called in. Ma, are you decent? Oh, Ami, thank God. The door to the building flew open, and a woman fell out of it and down the one short stair to her child, flinging her arms around their neck. Where have you been? There's... Wow, it's a long story. Ami's mother leaned over her child's tall frame to find Taryn there. He waved nervously, feeling the overwhelming desire for the sand to swallow him up right then and there. She took one look at his clothes, and her eyebrows twitched in curiosity. Is this one of those online role-playing friends you keep saying is going to come and visit? No, Mom, God! Ami looked around as though they were afraid someone was listening. Can we go inside? Come on, I'll put some coffee on. The three of them stepped into the house, which rocked a little as they did, and Taryn found the inside to be small and cramped, but still homey. Even the houses in Zaya were bigger. Ami's mother stepped over into an area with a countertop and a sink, filling up a pot with water. Ami sat on a small bench attached to a skinny table and patted the seat next to them. Taryn, you can have a seat if you like. Taryn did as he was asked and found that the cushion on the bench crunched and crackled as though it was filled with gravel. It had some spring to it, but not much. The woman looked over her shoulder as she poured the water into a machine and smiled. My name's Carolyn. I have the unfortunate pleasure of calling that beanstalk of a human being my child. Mama. I'm Taryn. It's a pleasure to meet you. Taryn tapped his fingers on the table. It was not wood, but he could not tell what the material was. So, Mom, Taryn, how do you want to approach this? Taryn slipped his hand into his pocket and drew a card, hoping they would tell him something. Queen of Wands inverted. Don't take silly risks. Lexus's voice rang through Taryn's head. Guard yourself. Where are you from, Taryn? Carolyn poured something into the top of the machine, something that smelled strongly of roasted earth, and hit a button on the front. The machine began to whir, and she leaned on the counter. What brings you to Sulphur? Just visiting with Ami, Taryn replied. I wanted to see a new place, meet some new people. Oh, adventurous. I like that. Most people who hear the word commune freak out. What exactly is this place, anyway? We're squatting, to put it politely, on government land. Park rangers that we're friends with have agreed to not narc on us, and we get a free place to live. This used to be a railroad town, but then everyone left. Now all that remains are the crumbling buildings and dirt. We figured that as long as we respect the land and the things that were left behind, we should be able to live here. Technically, the public land belongs to the citizens of the U.S., so why not use it if we clean up after ourselves? It seems like a quiet life. I like it a lot. Ami's dad thought we were crazy, and a lot of people think we're religious, but we aren't. We just don't want to be connected to a system that's designed to hurt people. We'd rather harvest our own water, electricity, and food. You know. Seems isolating. Nah, we got all the community we need right here. Most of us like it, and it's not like we're making anyone stay. We haven't put walls up around us, you know? Ami leaned over to a storage compartment and pulled something flat out of it, flipping it open like a folder and setting it on the table. Here, Taryn, check this out. Well, I'm going to go out into the garden to harvest things for dinner. I think there should be some carrots and turnips left. Let me know if you two need anything. Carolyn left, and the door to the home rattled shut with a clang. The folder that Ami had opened lit up, shining a light onto the two of them, and Ami glanced at Taryn from the side of their eye. Are you doing okay, bud? Good to know you weren't lying. Taryn nervously bounced his heel up and down. Definitely not. Here. Ami touched the surface of the object, and a still image, almost like an illusion, but so real Taryn could almost touch it, appeared on the screen. These are all my photos on my tablet. I travel all over the place if you want to check out the pictures I took. Taryn looked over the first, an image of Ami and their mother in front of a cascade of water somewhere in the desert. Ami swiped their finger across the shiny glass and revealed another image, one of food. They continued on for some time, Taryn flabbergasted by what he saw. His heart pounded in his throat, and his mouth soon grew dry from disbelief and panic. Ami showed him images of their travels all over the world with friends and family to places so green and wet it almost made his eyes water. And after a moment he found he had welled up with tears. The drops spilled over his eyelids and onto the table, and as soon as Ami caught one glimmering there, they looked up to Taryn's face. Whoa, man, it's okay. You don't understand. Taryn found it difficult to push the words from his lips. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of his lungs. We have been alone for so long, and there is a large chance that the person who founded the city that I'm from wanted the people in it to suffer. To know that there's an entire world out there, it's... He paused and looked out into the desert. The sky had clouded over a little, and Carolyn chatted with her friends and laughed. Suddenly, the world came crashing into perspective. Because of the selfish acts of a select few, hundreds, thousands had been sacrificed. In order to preserve some falsified ideal, the city had been built and people had been fooled into believing that the place would be safe for them, that it would be a way to start over and escape the fear caused by the world around them. There should be an M- here. But, unlike the commune in which Ami's mother lived, Sageno had quickly devolved into a cesspit of corruption, exploitation, and harm. Whether that was intentional or not, it was hard to say, and now they were all trapped like rats in a well, quickly flooding with water after a burst of rain. Ami, I have to get my people out of Sageno. They need to know that this world is out here. Are you planning on telling them that they can go? They have no idea how the world works out here. Like, do you even know what this is? Ami held up the folder with the photos. No. And that's the problem. I'll figure it out. I just need time. And on that day, baby Taryn saw his first tablet. Good job, buddy. Omen, Parissa, the palace, October of the first year. These things spell death, Shraga spat as they pointed at Parissa across the table. Parissa's fist tightened as the finger extended a threat. I will, under no circumstances, send any more of our people outside. I'm telling you, Ami speaks the truth, Perseus interjected. They're just art. How do we know? They could be lying to lure us outside. We've heard stories of raiders doing worse. Sagano hasn't seen raiders as long as I've been alive, Parissa argued. Shraga shook their head and looked out the window as if they were putting together a massive puzzle. No, undeniable. The safest bet is to keep our people inside, and I would rather deal with the crumbling infrastructure and the issue of space than demons or worse. I trust Parissa with my life, Esmond interjected, standing from his chair. You're treating her as if she doesn't know better, and I can say as someone who has trained her by my hand that she speaks the truth. She has no reason to deceive. She doesn't, but the impersonator and his little raider spy from the outside does. All of this Terran Lahal is a fraud. Conspiracy nonsense needs to stop now. Vina's hand tightened into a fist on the table. We know that those claims are unfounded. Not unfounded, just not proven false. Yet. Please. Councilman Blackwell raised his voice to silence the room. We have this. Blackwell lifted the papers that the scribe Nia had delivered after she had been sworn into secrecy. These mean nothing, Shraga spat. We don't know what he could have done to coerce that scribe. Those demonic cards have the ability to warp reality, alter time. It would not be out of the realm of possibility that Terran used the cards to convince the scribe to write what he wanted. You only see what you want to see. Everyone in the room jumped as a voice echoed across the space, and Parissa whipped her head over her shoulder to find Widow Mag there, her hands folded in front of her torso and bound by a rope, as always. The two other young men in the same blood-red robes flanked her. She raised her chin, looking down her nose at the papers on the table. I see you called a meeting without me. Even though I requested it, she said. Men. Perseus called for reinforcements, raising his gun. You can't just come in here. Can I not? Widow Mag raised a challenging eyebrow. Despite supposedly having the best security in the world, it is surprisingly easy to come in. Truth has a funny way of doing that. No matter how hard you try and keep it out, it somehow slips through even the tiniest of cracks. I tried to extend an invitation, Widow Mag, but they would not let me until the rest of the council had cleared the information first, Parissa explained. Let me see the papers. Blackwell's eyes scanned around the room, and then he slowly slid the papers across the table to Widow Mag. Several of Perseus's men entered the room with their weapons drawn, but he held up a hand, signaling for them to hold. The widow read over Nia's notes from their trip outside the wall. And where is Terran Lahal, exactly? Widow Mag's eyes met Parissa's. Returning Ami home, Parissa explained. Conspiring is the more likely answer, Shraga scoffed. Ayo, thank you so much, Lumaris, for that Ko-fi sale. Thank you so much for buying a book. I appreciate it. Widow Mag clicked her tongue. Truth will tear you all apart. My eyes do not deceive me, and she who sees does not lie. What the scribe has written is the truth. The outsider explained things clearly, and these sculptures were nothing more than art. There is an entire world out there that we have yet to explore. I suggest you all get to it. The entire room fell silent. Esmond, who had been fidgeting with his pen, fumbled it, and it went tumbling to the floor with a clang. Everyone glanced at each other nervously, waiting for someone to do something. Anything. So, I suppose, Blackwell started, pursing his lips into a thin line. The question is this. How do we proceed forward? Expanse. Terran. The desert. October of the first year. I still can't believe that half the stuff you tell me is real, man, Ami muttered as they poked the campfire with a stick. You're telling me you're some kind of prince? Yes and no. Not really. Not anymore. Terran curled his feet up underneath him and watched the flames dance, shooting little embers into the air. When he looked up at the sky, the inky blackness stretching from horizon to horizon, he sighed. Not a wall in sight. Nothing to keep him from seeing the stars. I don't think anyone should be king of anything. Every single person has the right to govern themselves. Should a government be there to protect them? Sure. If it's kept in check, if it serves the people over itself. But if the individual must lick someone else's boots, that's not really freedom, isn't it? God, you sound like Chuck. Chuck? He lives over there. Ami pointed with their stick in a vague direction. He's a Desert Storm vet. He doesn't really like much of anyone. Hates government. I'm glad he found a place here. There were so many things that Terran did not understand, and he could not possibly ask Ami to explain it all in one night. They had already spent the entire day searching what Terran learned was called the Internet, an infinite database of any knowledge ever. Ami explained that their phone, a small device that they used to do all sorts of incredible things, could not access the internet in Sageno. Something had been blocking it. Now that Terran was outside and could access the information, Ami had done everything they could to track down all knowledge about Sageno. Christian LaHale did exist. They found that out very quickly. Originally the son of a wealthy architect, LaHale had put money away into large institutions whose only goal was to grow wealth. The money multiplied, and so did LaHale's influence. And then he decided to build a city for what he called the best minds in the country. Why do you think he would do something like that? Terran asked, watching the shadows flicker across the ground like startled animals. Make a massive prison where no one could get out. I don't think he saw it as a prison. Ami took a bite from some dried meat their mother had brought out as a snack. I think he saw it as a paradise. People were, to put it very, very lightly, pretty messed up around the time he was growing up. If you weren't one specific way, you were barred from even basic human rights. That's awful. Still is awful. Not much has changed. It's partially why my mom and I live out here. It's hard for the bad to find you when even the government with all their money and drones and warheads can't. I don't think it'll last for very long, but at least it'll be nice while it does. So LaHale builds his little playground and writes the most discriminatory book ever. I don't know, man. Have you read Mein Kampf? We don't have that one in the palace library. Either way, the fact that he wanted to separate out people by, at the very least from what you're telling me, their wealth is crappy enough. Eventually, he created a playground where only people like him could have fun. Everyone else was responsible for wiping the crap off of the pavement. And if you didn't, you'd get shot for it. Terran shuddered and wrapped his arms around himself. It made him sick to his stomach to think that he was a direct descendant of such a monster. LaHale had told the public that Sageno was a place to be free of government oversight, its own self-governing body where the greatest scientists and thinkers of the time could get together and build something incredible, free of restrictions and dripping with funding. Of course people came. They came in the thousands. And then LaHale locked them all up. So, Ami shifted uncomfortably where they sat in their camping chair, as they had called it, and took a long swig from their beer. Your cards. I don't imagine when your great... Ami counted on their fingers. Great-great-great-grandfather opened Sageno in like the 60s? Yeah, that seems right. I don't imagine that they would have had the technology to make what you have, or even any of the computers or anything that you found. Well, the databases near the city are easily explained. Terran picked up his beer. Ami had offered him one, but he had not taken a single drink of it. It's as the letter Perissa and Perseus found said. LaHale put a company in charge of maintaining, updating, and running security there. I don't know if he's still paying for the people to run the whole thing, if he's been dead for almost 100 years. If he was some kind of Nepo baby and had a huge investment firm, it could just be that his family is so wealthy and that the money he put into the project in the beginning just hasn't run out yet. Billionaires are wild. Terran nodded. As for the cards, no one knows why they are the way they are. I read a lot of books under the instruction of my former master, and most people use the cards the way you're used to. They can tell the future through intuition, provide insight, and maybe even communicate with gods in some religions, but that's all. There is no record before Sageno of the cards doing anything like what I know. And if what you've told me is true, things like that are still not possible outside of the city. I didn't think magic was real. Ami offered the bag of jerky. I don't even know how we're going to explain this to my mom. We're not. Not yet. Terran wiped his thumb along his lip and grabbed a piece of meat from the bag, distant. A million worst-case scenarios flashed through his head as he attempted to plot out the entire ordeal. I have to deal with everything and make sure this information is released smoothly. First, I must prepare the people of Sageno to go outside, make sure they're safe to integrate with the society out here. Then, I need to make sure that this society outside is ready for us. We could contact the feds. I know the people of this commune wouldn't like feds showing up, but we could go somewhere private, maybe Gerlach or even Empire. They're not far from here, and we could borrow my mom's hatchback. Feds, federal agents, they're the best of the best in terms of government cops. They may be able to get you into contact with someone who can help sort all of this out so you're not alone. I'll have to check with the council on that one. I can't make decisions like that alone. It would be disrespectful to what everyone else wants. Ami chuckled to himself and threw another log into the fire. You're a really loyal guy, Taryn. My people's safety means more to me than you could ever know. After a moment of passing silence, Ami stood and stretched, pointing to the sky. You want to stargaze? We can climb on top of the RV and get a great view of the Milky Way. Taryn only nodded in response, and Ami led him to the back of their home, up a small ladder to the roof. There, they laid down, the structure creaking. Ami's mother, from inside the RV, banged on the roof, and Ami playfully banged back. Hi, Mom, they called. Don't do anything gross up there, she called back, her voice muffled by the tin of the RV. God, Mom! Ami huffed and crossed their arms behind their head, looking up at the bright, expansive stars above them. Taryn had seen the Milky Way before, but had never had a name for it. Thousands of beautiful stars, trillions of miles away, twinkled in a thick band of blues, purples, and whites, like a stain across the black tablecloth that was the night. As they laid there, the symphony of the night came through in hushed tones. The wind blew across the playa, and crickets chirped somewhere. Laughter from another campfire not far off echoed throughout the commune. Some kind of animal called in the distance, and Taryn became very aware that his heart was pounding. He could not seem to get it to slow, but it had been that way all day. Ami shifted on the top of the camper, and their arm brushed his. He chuckled nervously. They chuckled nervously. Uh-oh. Uh-oh! And quickly readjusted. Oops. Sorry. Okay, let me fix that. You're fine. Ami looked at Taryn and smiled, their grin bright in the dark. My mom doesn't know what she's talking about. You don't seem like the kind of guy who's into that stuff anyway. Way too serious. What kind of stuff? Taryn laid back as well and let his eyes follow the starry trail across the sky. Like sex? Wait, how old are you? I'll be 18 in December. Whew, you're older than you look. That's, They coughed. That's good. Fighting does that to you, I guess. If you're a prince, do you have to do arranged marriages and stuff? Alright, I'm going to take a brief break for just a second while we're waiting for ads. Don't do the hanky-panky on the top of the RV. I like Ami a lot, though. They're sweet. God, reading this and then looking at my Google News feed is giving me fucking whiplash. Oh my God. I need to lay down. Crazy. I'm going to finish this chapter and then the Parissa chapter after this, and then we'll call it a night. Sometimes. Did your parents do that to you? My parents are dead. Ami exhaled, blowing air through their lips, and after a drawn-out, awkward silence, they muttered, I'm so sorry. It's fine. I avenged their death anyway. The person who did it is long gone. So you got no one? No partner or anything? I had a partner once. That master I mentioned, Lexus, he saved my life. No, not like a partner in crime, you deviant. Ami laughed. Like, boyfriend. girlfriend, significant other, date mate number one, queer platonic bestie? Taryn shook his head. No, I've never had the time. It's hard for me to... Wow, this is hard. It sounds worse than it is. I haven't had the room to love, I guess. I don't know if it's because I'm too stressed out by everything going on, or if I just... Some people never feel it. It's cool. I was just curious. You're cute. Taryn passed his hand over his face. Maybe when all this nonsense is over, you can explain to me what half the words you're saying mean. You can count on it. Do you know how hard it is to find someone to date out here? Now, I didn't say that. Taryn laughed. He thought about what was said for a moment, his mind trailing to another time, back before everything. Before his parents had died, before Alexis, before Talbot, before the cards. He had been so young then. He would not have known love if it had hit him in the face. He had not gotten the other opportunity, as embassy boys had to fool around with girls, or boys, even though they got in more trouble for it. The thought of it has made his insides churn. It still did. But here, on top of the camper, everything was nice and calm. Perhaps it was partially curiosity and partially the moonlight. But the thought of spending time by Ami's side and seeing all the places they had seen made his heart flutter. What's the plan when we get back? First, I have to go to the council, see how Paris's meeting with them went, and ask if they want outside assistance from the feds, as you put it. If they say yes, which I hope they will, then we move forward with getting my people out of the rat trap we're in. You'll do just fine. Ami nodded as if they could see the future. Their hand brushed Taryn's in the chilly night, warmth against the frigid cold metal of the RV. Taryn hoped they were right. Sometimes you just gotta go with the flow. Deathless. Parissa, the sanctuary, October of the first year. Parissa strode across the cobblestone of Na'a, surety in her step. She covered her head from the barest sprinkling of rain. The people of Na'a moved around her, a sea of white and blue, everyone going about their day-to-day as if nothing had changed. Perspective was everything. Parissa had a wealth of knowledge that simply had not spread to the rest of the public yet. She stopped short at a street corner as a mammoth lumbered forward, the cart behind it carrying an entire store's worth of goods, and while the massive thing took its sweet time avoiding puddles on the road, she glanced to the wall to peruse an assortment of posters and notices there. Taryn's eyes met hers. Beware the shapeshifter. Parissa's eyes darted across the paper as she leaned forward to take in the entire thing. The royal portrait of Taryn that had been painted just after his coronation had been copied and plastered in the center of the flyer. If the king could deceive us before, who's to say that he hasn't done it again? Parissa scoffed and tore the paper from the adobe, crumpling it in her hands as she realized several other people who had been waiting looked over her shoulder to try to read the paper as well. As soon as the mammoth passed, she tore away, almost jogging to her destination. She needed answers. Perseus was never one to be superstitious. He had enough trouble grasping the cards. He was a man of logic, someone who liked things to be explained in a way that made sense, and the fact of the matter was that the cards did not make sense. They did not have an explanation. Sometimes things in the world just worked like that. If the wall and the computers in the old way were anything, they were more evidence that there was so much Parissa's people did not know. And she loved Perseus to death. She really did. She twirled her ring on her finger and remembered the moment he had proposed. It had been such an awkward moment underneath the same tree where he had first kissed her. She could not describe how happy she was, but when it came to matters of the uncertain, especially the potentially supernatural, Perseus was no help. He wanted to be able to run at everything he could, but he could not run at this particular problem they faced, whether toward it or away from it. Parissa had spent a sleepless night laying it all out. What she had was a puzzle. On one hand, they knew an undeniable truth now. A whole world ran all the way to a horizon that they could not see because of their city's walls. If it was up to her, she would tell the people right away. Her father had kept her in the dark about everything her entire life, so she knew what it was like to be misled. He had lied about her mother, about Sagano, about the expeditions, about Taryn. She could not do that to the people of Sagano. They deserved better. The main problem was that several barricades stood in her way, preventing her from simply unloading the truth. Bureaucracy. She had to get permission from people who, while qualified in their own right, had their own motives. The only two she felt she could really trust were Vina and Esmond, but even Esmond had his conservative tendencies. He was afraid, rightfully so. They could not be, or afford to be afraid now. On the other hand, Parissa had to keep it in mind that the people of Sagana were also easily startled. What the council told them, they believed. There was a reason that her father and others in the council, long before him, were able to simply lead them by the nose with no questions asked. To some extent, she understood why they needed to adhere to the council's rules. Firstly, if they did not before Perseus's reform, they would have been severely punished in a very physical sense. Secondly, if they did not, the only thing that awaited them was the outside, and outside of the walls, you died. There was nothing out there. Or, that was the story anyway. Parissa rounded one final corner and stood before a building that she had ignored her entire training. When she had been coming up in the elite guard, Commander Kreven had instructed all of them to completely ignore the building, even if it caught fire. Talbot, her father, had not liked the widow, and so he did not care if her building burned. The cathedral had been smashed in between two other existing buildings that had been abandoned for a while, just at the edge of Na'a before the district gave way to Atsa. The facade rose much higher than its surroundings, its metal carapace dinged and dented where things had been thrown at it. The metal sheet looked incredibly out of place between the crumbling adobe building and the weather-blasted wood one. Parissa was unsure if she had seen a sheet of metal that large anywhere else in the city other than in the barracks, so it must have been stolen. An eye, with one dripping crimson tear from the runny paint it had been made with, overlooked the narrowing street, almost an alleyway that led to the entrance. At the very top of the metal sheet, a circular window made of rose-tinted glass shone in the midday sun, leaving a harsh crimson disk on the ground as it reflected the heat and light. Parissa stepped into the shadow and tried the door, surprised to find it locked. She had expected a church to have their doors open at all hours. Her fist banged against the metal, sending an echoing clang down the street, and eventually the metal door slid open to reveal one of the members of the Creed in their red robes. They pulled their hood back from their shaved head and smiled. "Ah, Parissa, the widow has been expecting you." Parissa stepped from the shadow into an even darker blackness, and as soon as the door had closed behind her, the Creed member flipped a switch. A cascade of red lights bloomed to life down a long hallway covering everything in a rosy hue, and Parissa followed them down a winding corridor past rooms filled with other followers who ate, slept, and entertained themselves with reading or idle discussion. She had not expected there to be so many. Up a staircase at the back they went, the clergy members silent the entire way, and chills crept their way up Parissa's arms. The entire place felt as though it was crawling with eyes, and she found herself looking over her shoulder more than once as if someone followed behind her. Finally, the top of the staircase opened to one grand room filled with long benches and the circular window, which cast just as intense of a red spot on the inside of the building as it did on the outside. A large, bubbling fountain flowed in front of the window, and the warbling of the water added a comfortable ambience to the room, whereas the rest of the cathedral had been completely silent. In the back corner, someone worked diligently at a desk by candlelight. When Parissa entered, they stood, and soon Widow Mag approached, a smile on her face. "Parissa, it's good to see you." Widow Mag gestured to a bench for her to sit. "It's such a treat to have you visit my little church." "It's a lot larger than I expected." Parissa sat with caution, the old wooden bench creaking under her armor. She had thought about not wearing it that day, but something told her it would be better to be safe than sorry. "We must have room for everyone who wishes to seek the truth." Widow Mag straightened her robes, her hands unbound for the first time. "You have questions, I understand. Otherwise, why else would you be here? That obvious? You are a truth seeker, just like all who come into my walls. That's why every single one of my disciples is here, because they one day found they awoke with an itch that they just could not scratch. The only thing that soothed the sensation was wandering their way into my arms. It seems a little arrogant to claim that you're the only one who knows the truth. I never did." Parissa sighed and looked up at the stained glass window, her gears turning in her head. She pressed her lips together and finally turned to look at Widow Mag's face. Really look at her. Her features were completely unremarkable. She could be anyone with her dark hair and dark eyes. Her complexion gave nothing away. Classless, without a district, not a single mark of disease or injury blotted her skin. She said nothing while Parissa looked her over, and finally Parissa unclenched her jaw, realizing she had been holding it tightly. "I suppose I'm just confused. Most people lost in lies are. How is it that you know what you know? I'm like you, my dear." Widow Mag stood and strolled to the fountain one leisurely step at a time, only to sit at its edge. "You look into the water, murky, inky, and uncertain, and you pull truths from it." "How did you know that?" Parissa rose from her seat, startled. Widow Mag knew too much. You look up into a cup. I look into a fountain. Beings beyond have a strange way of relaying truth in similar ways to different people. This fountain gives us everything, and as widow, I use its waters to connect me to those other places, and see beyond a veil that most would not dare to cross. Parissa edged forward, curious to look into the water. When she finally made it to its edge, she saw nothing in it but the bottom of the fountain, covered in coins from people making wishes in it. She blinked a few times, unsure if what she saw was real, or if the red light from the window and the dancing shadows from the candles along the floor distorted her vision. After a moment of peering inside, she found her knees began to shake. You feel it too, don't you? The power of Zazdana. I just feel a little dizzy, is all. The deathless is hard to handle when you first come into contact with her. The truth is like a wave, and when it hits you, it can bring you to your knees. Parissa shook her head in an attempt to clear it. What does the water tell you? About the outside. It has told me a lot of things. First, the visions were unclear and I did not understand them. I saw images of great metal birds with wings outstretched from horizon to horizon, boxes full of people shooting across the ground at speeds I had never seen, and buildings so tall they touched the sky. Then those visions began to clear the longer I looked, and soon a painting of the world outside began to form. So what does it all mean? She who sees has decreed that all must know the truth, no matter the cost. It is not my will, but hers. That could cause the city to collapse. Widow Mag merely shrugged. This city was built on lies, and so the weight of those lies will pull it into the ground. Besides, it's not my decision how this entire thing is executed. No. That lies in the hands of my brother, Murada. He is the hand of the deathless. I am merely her eyes. Is that a threat? Not a threat. Just a promise. Are you with us or against us? That depends entirely on you, my dear. Widow Mag took Parissa's hand in hers, her skin soft and her fingers ice cold. If your council continues to spread the lies that they are, then we will have no choice but to fight them. Widow Corrine tried to be balanced, to reveal the truth gently, and that got her shot. The overseer, my brother, will not be so kind. Do you know how these work? Parissa pulled her cards from her pocket, their shining inky backs reflecting the red light in an eerie way. She fanned them out in front of Widow Mag, and the air crackled with electricity. Unfortunately, Widow Mag merely shook her head. I do not. My expertise does not lie in fortune-telling devices like this. I know merely what the water has told me, as it's told the widows before me. I do not feel the deathless's truth in those cards, so I cannot give you the answers you seek. Parissa scrunched her lips. She supposed it had been worth a shot. Why did you really come here? I'm trying to figure out what to do. The council is going to sit on the decision to release people from Sageno until we're all dead. They're too afraid. How do I let people out of this cage that they've been put in? To that, I can give you an answer. The widow bent down, dipping her hand into the fountain and scooping up a cup of water with her palm. She brought it to her lips, drinking it slowly, and tasted it as if looking for some secret in its flavor. Parissa's heart beat quickly in her chest, and the room hung still. The only sound was the cascading of the water down the fountain. And then the widow threw her head back, her eyes rolling back in their sockets. Parissa darted to her feet and caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her head in her hands while she convulsed. The widow's lips moved as if she were talking quickly, muttering just under her breath at a volume Parissa could not hear, and after a minute the episode passed, and Widow Mag collapsed in Parissa's arms. Widow Mag. Parissa looked over the widow's face, looking for any signs of consciousness. Widow Mag. Nothing. Widow Mag, Parissa cried out, shaking her. Someone help! Patience. The disciple who had not moved from their spot by the door raised their voice. Give her time. Parissa held her breath and waited. Soon, Widow Mag gasped as if she had just emerged from a nightmare and sat bolt upright in Parissa's lap. She gripped Parissa's arm and looked into her eyes, chest trembling. You must tell the people, Parissa, at whatever cost. She who sees commands it. If you do not, the city will burn. And with that, we'll call it a night. thank you so much to everybody who hung out and enjoyed this. If you're watching the VOD, thank you as well for sticking around and watching later. I want to extend a massive thank you to Aqua for that 11-month sub, and also to Lumaris for purchasing One Pale Reflection on Ko-fi. Thank you, thank you. I really do appreciate that a lot. If you guys are interested, of course, we will be back, and we will be reading this next week. So for now, tomorrow I'll be back with some writing sprints first thing in the morning to work on the Von Altus novellas. We're going to be back at Barissa's, which will be fun. And then, yeah, we'll have a nice calm day writing. So thank you again. If you're interested in backing this book and you're watching the VOD, be sure to jump into my Discord to get that link. If you're over on YouTube, the link to back the book is in the video description. I hope you have a fantastic night, everyone, and I will see you bright and early tomorrow. Bye-bye.